on, guys? Welcome back to Before the Whistle. I'm your host, Maddy, and if you're watching the video version of this, I do look a little rough right now, just to be transparent. Something kind of went on with my microphone yesterday, and my intro and outro did not record with any sound. Unfortunately, discovering this morning, and so I'm just going to be upfront. I'm not putting makeup on first thing in the morning, and my voice is a little morning voice as well, so we're just going to have to bear through all of those things as I introduce my guest for today's episode. His name is Matt Sprouse. He's part of the Group of Five Guys podcast. It's five guys that cover, the G5 programs across the country, and I remember connecting with them. I've spoken Twitter. You have these relationships with people, but they had come down for our opener against South Alabama and reached out, asked about, where they should go beforehand and host their show. And they ended up hosting it out of Bruno's. But just, watching back through those episodes, it was really just clear how well they did their homework. And I just really appreciated that. And I think, again, they really capture what I think the unique charm the G5 programs really provide. And being the fact that a lot of them played, I can't remember now which school it was. We're going to get to that really quickly. At a G5 program, notice that there just wasn't that much coverage. And so that really transferred over. And so I think that Tulane fans at the heart of, a lot of trying to get kind of this attention for the last two seasons can really relate to how these guys were feeling and why they started this podcast. But it kind of blew me away when I was listening to their podcast recapping that week one game and them saying, well, if you want a school where their fan base and their community are really behind their program, then you need to look at Tulane. And it kind of took me a pause for a second, but it's just kind of realizing that is the new normal. And I just feel like, again, ahead of homecoming this weekend, where Green Wave has a chance to become bowl eligible at home this year, rather than away at Raymond James Stadium last season, I just felt like it was a good time to really just look back at Tulane and get, again, just some insight from someone that isn't necessarily hold any Tulane bias, like, a lot of people that I bring on do for good reason. But again, really follows the Group of Five to know that, what we're talking about with Tulane really holds weight. All right. So I just wanted to start out. I know that you are one of five guys that represent this Group of Five guys, but what kind of, with everything talking about conference realignment and Power Five conferences and all of that, what made you guys really take to the G5 and want to cover that?
So all of us went to and graduated from Middle Tennessee. Most of us played there. And so the main thing was just the frustration of not having any coverage, or not having, in our specific example, not having a ton of fans, like even locally. And we knew there was a market for it. Me and Jesse, aka the Swag Bear, if you watch our show, we're sitting there watching ball one night and we were like, man, these schools have fans. These players are good. These coaches are really good. But ESPN don't talk about them. So we were like, somebody's got to do it. Let's do it. And then we've just been doing it for a few years and trying to grow every year.
And I know that obviously, again, there's the big draws of the Power Five, but I do feel like there is something special about G5 programs, especially, I went to Tulane, so I also can relate to the feeling of no coverage, and then also just kind of not really this promotion of these conferences at all, and not really on Tulane's end promoting much football until these last few seasons. But I just feel like there is a certain charm about the G5 programs. And what kind of do you guys really enjoy the most about covering them?
I mean, I think that's it. And we all reside in the Southeast. So most everywhere we've been so far has been in the Southeast. And it's just, the people love it. Even though you watch ESPN and you hear them talk about, nobody cares about these games, they do. You go to Tulane. We went to Tulane for week one, and the student section was incredible. And the tailgates are awesome. And so these people love their programs. And I just feel like some of the disconnect where, you guys don't have the issue probably quite as much, especially because y'all are good right now. So some of the problem with in your state, the Louisiana fans that want to go to Baton Rouge, it's if the media was covering the Cajuns and showing that they were a good team and it was an awesome environment, you wouldn't see these casual fans that think, oh, I got to go 3 hours away because it won't be as fun if I just stay at the school that I go to and pay tuition to and have classes with the players. So it's just kind of, I mean, that's it. The fans are just as passionate and probably more passionate because they don't have anybody to have a voice for them.
That's certainly a good point to have. I feel like that's the majority of the Tulane fan base. I'm curious, was that your guys' first Tulane game that you attended?
It was, yes.
So I was listening, back to your podcast, and it just stuck out to me that, you guys really said if you want to see a student section in a community that really rallies behind a program, I mean, it's kind of incredible because that really wasn't the case 2 or 3 years ago, even for this program. And especially when I went there from 2012 to 2016, I think I went to 2 games tops, one in the Superdome and one in Yeoman Stadium, but just kind of, talk through that experience. Cause I don't, necessarily get to go to these pregame things either. So I think that atmosphere is just as important as kind of the game itself.
Yeah, 100%. And Tulane is a little different just because of the city that you're in. So, and the campus, like we talked to Courtney Gaucher for a long time, just about how anything they want to build is built up. And, you don't have like a huge parking lot or a huge grove to tailgate in, or you don't really have any of those. Like we had to park at some real sketchy place, and Courtney was like, you better move that thing. And then we went back to the hotel and then Ubered back. But, yeah, I mean, just like the pregame stuff, when you get close to campus, you just kind of have that weird, that feeling in the air. It's like, this is about to be a big game. And we knew that going in because we knew how good South Alabama potentially was going to be. And then obviously Tulane coming off of last season, but you just felt it in the air. And then when we were down on the field watching warmups, you just see the students just filing in. And it's like, it's such a, I don't know how to describe that feeling. And it, you just watching the crowd come in, and like the players know it, they can feel it. The coaches feel it. You just being on campus that whole day, you were like, something big's happening today.
No, yeah, it's incredible. I'm really looking forward to homecoming this weekend. I mean, we had, the sellout crowd for Memphis last year, but I keep talking about how if Tajay Spears was out that Tuesday saying it would be really cool to look up into the stands and see it be full of fans. And it was still, that week, the game was sold out a few days prior, whereas this game was sold out in something like July, and is it's the most expensive event in New Orleans this weekend, or arguably Louisiana, but it's really high up there on a lot of college football games going around. And I think, not to discredit North Texas, but it's different than the Ole Miss game, where there's a lot of people that come in to see that SEC game. There's a lot of Ole Miss alumni in the area. The draw is Tulane, and that is really incredible. And so I do really get the feeling you're describing, because when I was a student, I was one of 5 in the student section for my final game. It was a torrential downpour, but just no one cared. The tailgating was the event, whereas it really, serves its purpose as a pregame for what has really been, to me, an impressive team. And I could see it happening last year, and I get kind of why perception took a while to catch on. But I mean, and again, in kind of listening to your guys' show, I had a similar thought about how much turnover there was in so many critical areas, but especially on the defense, just being the sideline reporter and hearing all the conversations Nick Anderson and Dorian Williams would have with guys, and the fact that they were leading the team in tackles all season. Just what did you really see from the Tulane defense that stuck out in that game, and then, through the season?
My favorite thing to do when we get to go on the field in pregame is, like, especially if I don't know what a guy looks like, my favorite thing to do is look at the teams come out in warmups and see if I can figure out which guy is the guy. And I just remember, 3 of us that went down there, we saw Patrick Jenkins come out, and we were like, oh my God, who is that guy? And then you see him put his uniform on, you're like, okay, yeah, he's a good player. But then you just watch him play, and like, you really see guys that are like, everybody's good, everybody's big, everybody's strong. But then you typically would see this when you watch like an Alabama or Ohio State play. But like guys like Jenkins, when you're like, out of the 100 guys that are standing down here, that guy is the animal on this field. And just, I mean, they didn't like, anytime you got single digit number defensive linemen, they're always good for whatever reason. Y'all got a couple of them. And like, they were in Carter Bradley's lap, like every play. And South Alabama's a good team with a good line, a great running game. And it's just, they didn't have a chance. And it's just like, we have guys like that. You're going to be in it versus anybody. I mean, that's how you're able to almost beat Ole Miss without your starting quarterback. And then it's just, it's so demoralizing for the other team. If you're a lineman just getting abused every single snap, it's like, man, this sucks. And the quarterback's having to run as soon as he gets the ball. So, I mean, just the sheer size and like just pure athleticism that you can just see from him walking in street clothes is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I really just our strength and conditioning coach, Kurt Hester, who got hired after the 2-10
Yeah.
year. I continue to say he's probably really the most important kind of secret weapon, I almost say, because he's just kind of almost the best kept secret just on our sideline. You hope, again, the bigger schools, granted, he is a Tulane alumni, but to see the way that they hit against Kansas State last year and then just watch that continue to grow and see guys like Chris Brazel, for example, our wide receiver this year, who I didn't think he had this contested catch physicality in him necessarily, but he comes in after the offseason and looks like he's put on 15 pounds. And you saw guys like that last year and have that year under Kurt Hester. And then you just think about Mekhi Hughes and his running ability and just how conditioned these guys are that I think we had our first cramp against UAB. It took that long and we had some tough home games in that stretch. But it's interesting too, because you bring up Patrick Jenkins, and I mean, if your defensive interior is getting to the quarterback, then that really just opens everything else up. And I think that's been such a surprise and pleasure for Tulane fans to watch. I don't think they've had depth like this in the trenches. I don't remember, how long it's been, but it wasn't there the last 2 seasons. They were kind of living on the edge after Adonis Freelou tore his ACL before last year's opener. But I also feel like the way that Shield Wood has just used pressure has been very intriguing to watch. And, seeing as you guys cover the G5, I'm assuming you probably saw quite a bit of him over at Troy. Does this kind of surprise you that Tulane's defense has taken on this identity? And what do you kind of see as the biggest mark that Shield Wood has from carrying that over from Troy to now?
Yeah, it's funny you bring him up because before last season, we actually went to Troy's spring game. And, spring games are spring games. I get it. There's not a lot you could tell, but I remember all of us walked away from that spring game and we were like, Troy's defense is going to be all-time great. And Troy really wasn't expected to do much of anything last year. We were like, this defense is going to be all-time. And then sort of the same deal. They got a couple guys, or had and still have a couple guys that are just like physical specimens, but it's getting those guys in the right place, playing assignment. You guys, Tulane, Troy, like you guys don't miss tackles. You don't see like the stupid, I hate the little fast quick screens so much, especially when you're playing against a good defense, because if you don't make the first guy miss, it's a negative gain or it's a negative play every time. And against the really good defenses like Tulane, every single time. So that's part of it. And then like you talked about those guys putting pressure on the quarterback, especially up the middle like that. I mean, just like you can't, because there's no pocket. I mean, if a guy gets beat around the edge, the quarterback can step up or can do a lot of things, but put pressure up the middle, that you got nothing to do. And then I wanted to touch too, because you're talking about Hester, the strength coach, because didn't he win strength coach of the year last year or this
from Football Scoop?
Yeah, something like that. So, but that's the part of that too, is like the depth you brought up, like injury prevention, because guys are freak athletes really before they get to the strength coach, but then it's keeping that strength, keeping them healthy, keeping them conditioned. And that's where you can have a guy that everybody thought was going to be the second or third running back be the number one guy and no problem. And you got 3-4 receivers that all look like they could be number one guys.
Yeah, I think the running back competition was fascinating for us that have been there almost every day, and going on radio shows and doing my show and getting these questions about who's replacing Tajay Spears, why haven't they named someone yet, and kind of seeing that as a sound the alarm time, where I'm just thinking you have a true freshman in Arnold Duda Barnes, you have Shoddy Clayton Johnson, who played behind Spears last year, but you really saw him come on the second half of the season, and Iverson Celestine kind of in the first half of that season, but it was really all Spears towards the end. And so you just really never saw, I think, a complete game out of any of them. And then there's Mekhi Hughes, who everyone was really high on during training camp last year. He tears his ACL and, he's never taken the field until this season, but it sticks out to me. I don't know how important it is, but when Tajay Spears would have his load management days last year, he'd spend most of those days working with Mekhi Hughes on his rehab. Yeah. And just the fact that he shot out of the gates as, I think he was a little higher up on the depth chart due to his ability to pass protect, but pretty much at the bottom of it in terms of thinking that he was going to be that true running horse. But he has been, to me, more impressive than the linebacking group, to be honest with you, because I think him alone in that position, what he's been able to do, how he's been able to work and improve on his pass protection, you could see it on a weekly basis. And he has some break tackle ability that even Tajay didn't have. So he is a little different, but the fact that Willie Fritz, his run the ball philosophy, it's just incredible that he's been able to keep that running and find someone like Mekhi Hughes, where if you had named running back at the start of the season just because, giving it to a veteran or something, then we would have all missed out on this.
Yeah. And it's fun. Like that was I'm guilty of it because I thought you lose a guy like Spears, you lose your linebackers. Like, I'm like, there's just no way that they're going to be able to fill that void. I mean, we knew y'all were good still. We knew it was good offensive line, defensive line. Of course, that helps. And then obviously Pratt, but like, you're not just losing an NFL guy, like you're losing like all-time great players. And like both of them are both Dorian Williams on defense and then Tajay Spears on offense are looking like they're going to have pretty darn good NFL careers. So these are not just like practice squad guys. These are like very good players. And to just not skip a beat like that. I mean, the game versus Memphis, the way they closed that game with Hughes and that offensive line was like, it was beautiful to watch as an offensive line guy, just to like see the holes and then him falling forward and getting the extra yards. Just it's awesome to watch.
Well, yeah. And that first game against South Alabama, that's where I said, okay, I'm pausing until this competition plays out, because I think that was where you saw the first inklings of Mekhi Hughes. And for me, it was the play where Michael Pratt was running the ball and he got stuffed. And then I just see Mekhi Hughes like envelop him in his arms and drag him 3 yards upfield. And I'm just thinking that's an incredible amount of upper and lower body strength, because you're not just dragging Michael Pratt, but just to have the quick awareness. And it was just this very like robotic movement. I started laughing on the sidelines. So I didn't really think he had that in him, but it really felt like that was the first game where, they named a running back one, first time all year that's really happened. And I think you guys saw probably Michael Pratt. I mean, probably it was without question one of his top games of all time against South Alabama. I think that the fact that they've been able to withstand him being out for 2 games, and like you mentioned, it being a closer loss than the score even indicated against Ole Miss, but then, he still was a little banged up these last few weeks. And I think that was really where you saw him get back into a rhythm. And I think that this weekend is really a prime time for him to, take advantage of a team that's giving up as many points as they're able to score. But, just seeing what he could do at full strength now that they have a running back one, and then the amount of depth they have at wide receiver, to your point about the strength and conditioning, just the fact that they're able to rush with so many receivers as well. I really feel like this is going to be that really strong offensive follow-up for Pratt this weekend.
Yeah, I agree. And and that South Alabama game, like he didn't miss a throw. I think he didn't throw it a ton in that game, but I think he was like 15 of 16 or something crazy, but he's got guys running wide open and he just puts it right on them in stride. But yeah, like in these games, it's almost like, I don't want to discredit North Texas because that's why we're here. They got good players. They got a good coach, like all that. But in games like this, where you're the clear favorite, just don't turn it over. Stay healthy. No stupid penalties. And that's where, Pratt didn't turn it over. Horton didn't. I think he threw 2 picks when he came in on the season. So you guys don't turn it over much at all. So you just want to see a clean game. And hopefully, you can get Pratt out of there by the third or fourth quarter.
Yeah, that's very true. But I think, to your point, where they have 2 of the top 5 running backs in the conference in terms of yards per game, and they are second in the conference in their rush yards per game at that with 195. And to have 2 or 3 guys that can credibly run the ball and their quarterback's only thrown 1 interception, it's certainly, one that you don't overlook. But it is weird, again, as an alumni and someone that's been here for 3 years, and they've been a wild 3 years at that, to just comfortably say, Tulane should be able to win out this season. I think it speaks to all the playmakers that we just talked about, but I ultimately feel like I'm biased. It's the only coach I've been around, but Willie Fritz to me has really just been such an incremental point of literally changing Tulane history. And I know you guys have covered a lot of G5 coaches, but what have you kind of say about Willie in this last couple season stretch?
Yeah, well, the year before last was obviously, the team's like displaced. So you got to give credit to even like stick together to a degree, even though the season went terribly as far as wins and losses. But then to bounce back with the season last year, and then it's easy to beat USC, so you've pretty much done the best that a group of 5 school can realistically do. Yeah. You went to the New Year's Six and you beat the Heisman Trophy winner. So to just be able to come right back and lose a bunch of guys and just keep rolling is one of the most impressive things. And hopefully for our sake, Tulane doesn't get any kind of Power 5 nod anytime soon, because we need good teams like this around. And hopefully, I mean, he seems like he's a Tulane guy. He doesn't seem like he's wanting to go anywhere. So hopefully for that too.
Yeah. So I go back and forth between ending these with score predictions, but I just figured I would have at it. So what's your kind of prediction for this homecoming game for Tulane this weekend?
What's the line on this game?
That's a great question. I think
20 and a half, I think, something like that. 42-13 Tulane. That's just I'm just spitballing.
Want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have nothing to really, counter it with, so I'll just go 37-14 Tulane. Just I have really no idea where I'm going with that, but I do think, again, it's a defense that Tulane can absolutely take advantage of, but it's an offense that the defense cannot afford to play like they did for that 3-series stretch against Memphis, but it was really their first time in man coverage all year. I do expect them to ultimately win comfortably, but I did just want to shout you guys out because in watching back that podcast that you guys covered, it's easier said than done to follow this many programs and to just have the knowledge and understanding of every single team. It just really stuck out to me. So I just wanted to give you a shout out on that.
No, appreciate that. And I'm sitting here listening to you rattle off coverages and players. And I'm like, I hope she doesn't put me on the spot with one of these guys. Cause I probably don't know. I mean, we try to watch as much as we can. Having these midweek games helps to see, more teams and whatnot. But, yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's fun to talk about these guys because come February, March of 2024, then you'll finally see the media start talking about these guys and we'll be like, we told you about Tyjae Spears a long time ago, guys. So no, but yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. All right, y'all. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, that was Matt Sprouse, one of the 5 guys in the group of five guys podcast. And, just again, to support and shout out these independent, again, people that are really just hustling every single day to try to bring people really good content. And it just feels like they really do such a good job of that. And again, for being 5 guys that this is, we don't have the amenities of these big industries or companies have you. And then you kind of think of pollsters and how people complain about the fact that they don't feel like they're really watching those G5 games at minimum. Well, it's safe to say, based on, again, just speaking with Matt just now, hearing everything he had to say about our defense, and again, being able to bring in good insight because they've followed South Alabama for so long. They followed Troy as well. And so you see those opponents for Tulane, you see the defensive coordinator. And again, hearing those comments was just really good from, again, one of those outside sources. But I did just want to, again, shout their podcast out because I do think it's really important to support these kind of things. And again, just listening to how they describe, the pass rush, Michael Pratt, it really stuck out. And I'm really glad that, I had Matt on and we were able to really break down Tulane. And again, I just feel like that was really the important thing to do heading into this matchup against North Texas. For what it's worth, I will say about North Texas, Tulane definitely has an opportunity on the offensive side of the ball. The team gives up as many points as they score. I believe the margin is they've given up 213 points this year, scored 214, but their last game was a 45-14 win over Temple. And Temple's really not doing that great this year, to say the least. So I think that kind of evened out the columns a little more, but all of that to say, I think that the offense really has an opportunity to build on that momentum of the second half of last week. And, having Michael Pratt be back to healthy and see all of the chemistry with the really deep group of receivers and tight ends at this point, and really good running back room as well, headlined by Mekhi Hughes. The defense, their quarterback, I believe, is ratioed of interceptions to touchdowns. He's thrown 20 touchdowns one interception. All I know is he's definitely thrown one interception this year. I mean, say it how you will, that's just good ball security. So I'll be curious to see how Tulane's secondary really attacks that, especially again, considering how many points off turnovers they've scored, considering that they've won now the last 14 of their 15 games where they forced that turnover. Be curious to see if they're able to make that happen. But they have the second rush defense, or I'm sorry, the second rush attack in the conference, 20th in the nation. And not just that, they have two of the top 5 rushers in the American on their team. And that's not even counting one of the other running backs. When looking at the chart with Corey and Steve and our prep, I had kind of pointed them out. So I'm not sure what happened with Blake Watson last week for Memphis, but they did have a pretty good running back room as well. And Tulane held them to 45 points on the ground. So I'll be really curious again to see if Tulane's able to match that performance and shut down what looks like it could be a 3-headed running back attack headlined by a really, quarterback who really emphasizes taking care of the football. And so, special teams oftentimes ends up being that kind of sneaky horse and all of that. But I do think this is a game that we are going to see a 1-0 victory for Tulane at home. And what a weekend to do it at that. So with that, I will see y'all at homecoming. Hope you all are coming down. Again, that kickoff is at 2:30. If you're not around, 104.1 The Spot is what we're always on. That starts at 1:30 with our pregame coverage. All in that. And I will see you next Tuesday, y'all. Roll Wave.